And that phrase, went after, has a sexual connotation. If my angels go there and they try to sexually assault them, then it's over. Their fate is sealed. That deal with this story, we find out that actually 5 cities were going to be destroyed. One gets saved because of what Lot does.
Abraham, deeply rooted in his faith, presents his nephew Lot with a choice of paths, leading Lot towards the notorious city of Sodom. Despite divine warnings, Abraham endeavors to protect the innocent, yet Lot's misguided choices draw him deeper into peril. Their decisions echo through history, underscoring the critical nature of wise choices. Embark on a journey with us into this ancient narrative, where each decision can spiral into disaster or pave the way to salvation. Join us to witness how pivotal moments shape our legacy, inviting us to reflect on the power and consequences of our choices. Abraham and Lot's big test. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah begins with Abraham leaving his father's house as directed by God, bringing along his nephew, Lot. Eventually, they had to separate due to their large flocks. Although Abraham was the one with God's promise, he generously allowed Lot to choose his land first. Lot chose selfishly, picking the visually appealing but morally corrupt Jordan Valley near Sodom. Lot was drawn to the lush, garden-like area of the Jordan Valley, without considering the character of its inhabitants. He settled near the notorious city of Sodom, oblivious to its residents' worsening wickedness. Meanwhile, Abraham, guided by deeper, lasting values, settled in Hebron, showing his trust in God's plan over immediate gratification. One day, while Abraham was near Hebron, he was visited by 3 men who were actually divine messengers. Abraham showed them great kindness, offering rest and a meal, demonstrating ancient hospitality's importance. These visitors brought news that Abraham's elderly wife, Sarah, would bear a son, a promise that made Sarah laugh in disbelief due to her and Abraham's old age. Despite her laughter and subsequent denial, the messengers confirm that nothing is impossible for God. The narrative then shifts to the impending doom of Sodom and Gomorrah. God contemplated sharing his plans with Abraham, recognizing Abraham's future significance and his role in guiding his descendants towards righteousness. God revealed that he would inspect Sodom and Gomorrah due to their great sinfulness, prompting Abraham to engage in a heartfelt negotiation with God, emphasizing justice and mercy. Abraham questioned if God would spare the cities for the sake of 50, 45, 40, 30, 20, or even 10 righteous people. Through this, Abraham demonstrated his commitment to justice and his belief in God's fairness, persistently advocating for the innocent. This dialogue between Abraham and God illustrates Abraham's moral character, his concern for both the righteous and the wicked, and his willingness to intercede on their behalf. His efforts reflected not just a negotiation, but a deep understanding of God's justice and mercy. Abraham's advocacy for the inhabitants of Sodom and Gomorrah, including his attempts to find any righteous individuals among them, showcases his empathy and leadership. Instead of only seeking to save his nephew, he extended his concern to all the city's residents, reflecting his compassionate nature. Following their discussion, the divine messengers, revealed to be angels, proceeded to Sodom, where they encountered Lot. Unaware of their true nature, Lot still welcomed them with hospitality, mirroring Abraham's actions, yet contrasting his life choices. Lot had gradually become entwined with the corrupt community of Sodom, moving from a distant observer to a city leader, showcasing the dangers of being lured into immoral surroundings. This narrative not only explores the concepts of justice, mercy, and righteousness, but also emphasizes the impact of our choices and the power of intercessory prayer and concern for others, regardless of their moral standing. It highlights Abraham's significant role as a mediator and moral compass, striving to uphold righteousness while demonstrating profound care and concern for all individuals, reflecting the qualities of a true leader. Lot was essentially a good man, disturbed by the bad things happening around him. The Bible tells us he was troubled every day by the wrongs he saw. The story of Lot, like Noah's, shows us God saves good people while also punishing the bad. God saw Lot as good, even when surrounded by evil. But Lot made the mistake of not moving away from a bad place. This tells us we should not only dislike wrong, but also act to stay away from it. Lot made a huge error that led to big problems. He gave up on what he stood for, making his family and friends lose respect for him. They no longer trusted him or his values, which led to them not being saved. This teaches us the importance of sticking to our beliefs no matter what. We also see Lot's eagerness to protect his angelic guests. Unlike usual welcomes, Lot was extra eager to have them in his home. This tells us that how we do things can matter as much as what we do. Genesis 19:4-5. The men from Sodom, old and young, surrounded Lot's house, demanding the guests come out. Sodom's people broke all norms of kindness, driven by bad desires. The city was known for violence and bad behavior. Later, in Ezekiel 16, God strongly criticized Judah for their sins, comparing them to Sodom. He pointed out that Sodom's errors were not just being proud or ignoring the needy, but also included more severe wrongs. The story from Genesis shows God's anger wasn't only at those sins, but also at the sexual violence in Sodom. The term committed abomination likely includes these serious sins. The takeaway is to avoid all types of wrongdoing. The men of Sodom's sin was related to their desire for Lot's guests. Lot tried to protect his guests, offering his daughters instead, which shows his desperation to keep his guests safe. Genesis 19:6-9. But the people refused and threatened him. They also taunted Lot, saying, "This guy came here as a stranger, and now he acts as if he's our boss. He's going to be even harsher on us." They aggressively pushed against Lot, trying to break down the door. Lot pleaded, "Please, my friends, don't do such a terrible thing." Lot was really struggling to make the people of Sodom listen. He had different ideas of right and wrong compared to them. The men of Sodom were following their own desires without caring about Lot's pleas that their actions were harmful. This leads us to a big question. If we didn't have the Bible to tell us what's right and wrong, especially about our sexual behaviors, how would we know how to act? We shift from Abraham to Lot, whose next steps near Sodom show us the consequences of hard decisions. No one listened. Sodom fell. It seems that just doing whatever we want isn't a reliable way to live. Lot shockingly said, "I have 2 daughters who haven't been with any man. Let me bring them to you instead." Offering his daughters to the mob was shocking and wrong. The behavior of the people of Sodom shows deep moral failure, but Lot's choice to offer his daughters is equally shocking. This dreadful decision reflects the dangerous desires of the mob. To really understand this story, we need to think about the culture back then. Women were often seen as less important in those ancient times, not getting the respect they deserved. On the other hand, protecting a visitor was seen as incredibly important, more important than family members' safety. This shows a very mixed-up idea of hospitality and responsibility. This man came here to live, and he won't stop judging us. The people of Sodom ridiculed Lot and dismissed his attempts to guide them morally and spiritually. Maybe Lot hoped that by compromising, he could influence these men, but they lost all respect for him. Yet Lot still called these wrongdoers my friends. Genesis 19:10-11. But the angels reached out, pulled Lot inside the house, and locked the door. Then they made the men at the door blind, from the youngest to the oldest, so they got tired of searching for the door. The angels had to use amazing, maybe even supernatural power to stop the men. For the first time, Lot realized his guests were not ordinary men. The act of blinding the men was beyond human ability. Now, their physical blindness showed how morally blind they were too. The angels saved Lot. Genesis 19:12-14. Then the angels told Lot, "Find anyone else you have here, sons-in-law, sons, daughters, anyone in the city. Get them out. We're going to destroy this place. The cries against it are so loud, the Lord has sent us to destroy it. So Lot went to his future sons-in-law and said, "Hurry, leave this place. The Lord is about to destroy this city." But when Lot warned his future sons-in-law about the city's coming destruction, they thought he was making a joke. They didn't believe the danger was real. This shows us something important. Sometimes people won't take serious warnings seriously. The angels who came to Lot didn't know everything right away. They didn't know all the members of Lot's family until he told them. This is interesting because it shows that even beings from heaven aren't all-knowing. When the angels asked Lot if he had anyone else in the city, it was like they were reminding him and us to think about the safety of our whole family, not just ourselves. Lot had daughters who were supposed to get married soon. The angels had come to destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah because of their wickedness. But even though these places were being punished, God wanted to save Lot and his family from being hurt. When Lot told his sons-in-law that the city would be destroyed, they didn't believe him at all. They thought he was not serious. Because they didn't believe, they missed their chance to be saved. This part of the story teaches us that sometimes people will not believe us, even when we tell them about real dangers. Looking at Lot's life, we see something sad. He was saved from the disaster, but he didn't really make a difference with his life. He was rescued, but he didn't do anything important or lasting. This tells us that it's not enough just to be safe from danger. What we do with our lives matters a lot too. In the morning, the angels were very clear with Lot. They told him to hurry and leave with his wife and daughters to avoid the disaster that was about to happen to the city. But Lot hesitated. This made the angels grab him and his family and pull them out of the city to save them. This shows God's kindness. But Lot's sons-in-law were left behind because they didn't listen to the warning. They didn't get another chance. The angels were like messengers telling Lot to escape from the coming disaster. They kept telling him to move quickly and save himself. But Lot was slow to act. He hesitated, even though he knew how bad the city was. This shows us that sometimes we can be too slow to act on good advice, especially when it means leaving behind things or places we're used to. The angels had to take Lot and his family out of the city by force. This was God being merciful, especially since Abraham had prayed for Lot. But even after being saved, Lot made another request. He asked to go to a small town called Zoar. This part of the story shows that sometimes people hesitate and resist leaving dangerous situations, even when they're being led to safety. This is a reminder for us not to stick around in bad situations longer than we should. Why do some believers get too close to bad influences instead of running away from a place that's going to be destroyed? In the Bible, in Genesis 18, there's this big talk between Abraham and God. Abraham tries to make a deal with God. If there are just 10 good people in Sodom and Gomorrah, save the cities. But there weren't even 10 good people there. Still, because Abraham asked, God decided to save Lot and his family from the city's end. God's rescue was so strong, it was almost as if Lot didn't really want to leave. Think about where Lot was at mentally. He liked his life's comforts too much to be completely happy with God, but he also felt too connected to God to be fully happy with just his life's comforts. This story is trying to tell us something important about being happy with what we have and balancing our love for God with our everyday lives. The story moves to a critical moment, showing the difference between God's kindness and human mistakes through Lot's eyes. Lot drags his feet, escapes last minute. The angels took Lot outside and told him, "Run for your life. Don't look back and don't stop anywhere around here. Go to the mountains or you'll be swept away." But Lot was scared. He said, "Please, sirs, you've been really kind to me and you've saved my life, but I can't make it to the mountains. The disaster will catch up to me and I'll die. Look, there's a small town nearby. Can I run there instead? It's small, but I'll be safe." The angel said, "All right, I'll let that town be safe because of your request, but hurry, get there fast, because I can't do anything until you're safe." That's why they named the town Zoar, which means small. It's interesting to see how the angels were more ready to save Lot than he was to save himself. This is common in spiritual situations. When Lot says, "Oh no, my lords," he sounds desperate and weak, unlike Abraham's bold prayers. We see here, "I cannot do anything until you arrive there," which goes back to Abraham's question, "Won't the judge of all the earth do what's right?" This shows us God sticks to his own rules, making sure the good people are safe before he punishes the bad ones. That's why they ended up calling the place Zoar, which means small. It's the place Lot asked to be saved to. When Lot got to Zoar, that's when God made it rain fire and brimstone on Sodom and Gomorrah from the sky. He destroyed everything, the cities, the people living there, and even the plants. God waited to start the punishment until Lot and his family were safe in Zoar. This was to keep the promise to Abraham. Once Lot was safe, then God could judge Sodom and Gomorrah. They got a complete punishment, but only after God made sure there were no good people left to suffer. Before this all happened, Sodom was a super nice place, like the Garden of Eden. Lot saw that the Jordan Valley was full of water and really nice before God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. It was as beautiful as a paradise, just like the land of Egypt, near Zoar at the south end of the Dead Sea. Even though the people of Sodom and Gomorrah had received so many good things and seen so many kind deeds from God, they still chose to ignore him. They had felt God's amazing power, kindness, and forgiveness more than anyone else nearby. Through Abraham, God had saved them from big problems. They listened to Melchizedek speak about God and watched how both Melchizedek and Abraham showed God's love and care through their lives. Despite all these experiences, they decided to disregard everything. Think about the story of Lot's wife. She turned into a pillar of salt because she didn't listen to the angel's warning to not look back at the city as it was being destroyed, Genesis 19:17. This story is a strong reminder for us. We should look ahead to our future and what saves us instead of getting stuck in thoughts about a dying world that is under God's punishment. Jesus talked about Lot's wife in the Bible to underline this point, Luke 17:32. Lot's wife is mentioned only a few times in the Bible. She's known for how she died, disobeying God's command. While the Bible doesn't tell us much about her life, her death carries important lessons for us all. It's interesting to note that her name isn't given in the Bible, yet her story is packed with lessons. We don't know why she looked back at the city while it was being ruined. Lot's wife had every chance to survive. Even though her name isn't mentioned, we can guess she knew about God through Lot and might have learned much from Abraham, her uncle. She might have been there when Lot was captured and later rescued by God. She was extremely lucky to have angels visit her home. They even guided her out of Sodom by hand. But in the end, none of that helped her. She wasted the chance God gave her. Here are some important points to remember. First, it's possible to lose your way permanently, even if you're religious and have every chance to do good. Even if you come from a good family and have lots of spiritual benefits, you can still end up lost. Second, you might start well on the right path, but if you go back to old ways, you'll be lost forever. Your beliefs and choices are your own responsibility. But why did it matter so much to God if she just looked back at Sodom? First, looking back showed she doubted God. She was supposed to accept God's judgment on Sodom. God had spoken, and his word would come true. We often say we believe in God, but then we doubt when times get tough. God wants us to trust him and focus on spiritual things. Second, looking back was not following God's clear orders. God had said not to look back and to head for the hills without looking back. She didn't have a chance to explain or justify her disobedience. This is why we find the stories of Uzzah, Ananias, and Sapphira so challenging. They show us what justice really means and how God feels about not listening to him. Third, looking back might show she still loved Sodom too much. She was leaving the city, but her heart was still there. Don't you know that being the world's friend means you're God's enemy? Anyone who chooses to be a friend of the world becomes an enemy of God. James 4:4. Do we really want to fit in with the rest of the world? It's not about leaving everything worldly. This world stands for everything against God, all the bad stuff that used to be part of our lives. After the downfall of Sodom and Gomorrah, we see what happens next to Lot and his daughters as they deal with their choices. Abraham sees Sodom burn. The punishment of Lot's wife was harsh, sudden, and final. She lost her last chance to escape when she looked back. Any kindness she had seen before was instantly gone. The Bible doesn't describe in detail what happened, showing it as a direct result of her choice. A time will come when you no longer have the chance to follow God's commands. Some people laugh at teachings about hell or upcoming punishment. They think it's just to scare kids and the gullible. But we're too smart for that, aren't we? Yet, Jesus talked about hell more than any other topic. His descriptions of a place where people suffer endless pain should make us think. Remember the many examples of people who had a chance to do the right thing, but then lost it forever. People like Pharaoh, Nab, Abaho, Korah and his friends, and Judas Iscariot are all examples from history that teach us lessons. If we don't tell others about the dangers of hell, it's like we're hiding part of the truth from them. This would mean we're partly to blame if they end up being punished by God for their wrong actions. God chose the prophet Ezekiel to watch over his people and tell them what they needed to hear. The story of Lot's wife still has meaning for us today. God is still ready to punish wrongdoers, and he tells us not to cling to our past mistakes. Do you want to escape God's punishment? Let Jesus' sacrifice cover you. Let God's messengers lead you to a safe place, just like they led Lot out of danger. Genesis 19:27-29. Abraham woke up early and went back to where he had prayed to God. He looked out over the lands of Sodom and Gomorrah and saw smoke rising high into the sky, just like from a giant oven. This happened right after God had destroyed the cities but remembered Abraham's concern and saved Lot from the chaos. Abraham felt deeply connected to the events because of his recent prayers to God. He realized that God had listened to him when he prayed for Lot's safety. This made him hold on to the memory of his conversation with God as he witnessed the aftermath. Think about how someone who believes in God should feel when they see wrongdoers being punished. They should humbly accept God's decisions. They should be deeply grateful for their own safety. They should be even more careful about how they live, avoiding sin and recognizing its dangers. The Lord destroyed the wicked cities with a shower of burning sulfur, showing his power and judgment. Some think that sulfur burst from the ground and then fell like fire from the sky, causing massive smoke clouds. Lot's wife looked back and turned into a pillar of salt, a permanent reminder of what happens when you disobey. The thick smoke that Abraham saw was from the sulfur that burned everything. But even while punishing the sinners, God thought of Abraham and saved Lot because of Abraham's request. Now, about Lot and his new living situation, Genesis 19:30-32. Lot moved to the mountains with his daughters because they felt unsafe and unwelcome in Zoar. They chose to live in a cave, isolated from everyone else. Despite losing everything, Lot and his daughters managed to find or bring wine with them. The story goes that the daughters decided to preserve their family line by having children with their father. Lot and his daughter's situation got complicated. They left Zoar, not explaining why, but they were clearly not content or welcome there. So, they went to live in the mountains, seeking safety but living in isolation in a cave. Despite everything, they had wine with them, either from their old home or found in Zoar. The eldest daughter came up with a plan to continue their family line and discussed it with her sister. They decided to make their father drink wine so they could have children by him. The first night, the eldest daughter went to Lot without him realizing it. The next day, she convinced her sister to do the same. Both ended up pregnant by their father. The eldest daughter named her son Moab, the ancestor of the Moabites. The younger daughter named her son Ben-Ami, the ancestor of the Ammonites. Both of these nations have their own stories connected to this family's complicated history. The Bible shares a story that might make us feel uneasy. It talks about how the oldest daughter of Lot did something wrong with her father. This part of the story is hard to hear because it's about something that shouldn't happen. However, it's important for younger people to understand the difference between good and bad actions through the Bible. The Bible doesn't hide bad things, but it always points out that God doesn't approve of sin and there are consequences for doing wrong. It's an odd truth that Lot, who once opposed the wrong actions of the men in Sodom, ended up making a big mistake himself, influenced by too much drink. He acted in a way that was not right, especially as a father. From this, 2 sons were born, Moab and Ben-Ami, who later became the forefathers of the Moabites and Ammonites. These 2 groups often fought with the people of Israel. The names Moab and Ben-Ami have meanings that remind the Israelites of the unfortunate origins of these nations. The story is also a reflection of God's judgment on a society that had lost its moral compass, but it's also a warning to avoid falling into similar traps. Extracting Lot from Sodom was hard, but removing Sodom's influence from Lot's life and his family proved even harder. Despite his faults, Lot was known for being a good person in many ways. He was welcoming, kind, and even had a role similar to that of a judge in Sodom, where he aimed to protect the town from moral decay and guide them towards better behavior. Reflecting on the ruins of a great city, we dive into the results of Lot's actions and what they teach us about right and wrong, the inevitable danger of comfortable lies. Lot was recognized as a man who stood for what was right and just, even though he lived among people who did not. The Bible mentions that Lot's soul was troubled by the wrongdoings he saw every day. This tells us that God knows how to save people who try to do good, even when they are surrounded by bad influences. Despite criticizing the corrupt ways of Sodom, Lot was tempted by the comfortable life there. He chose the luxuries of the city over a simpler, cleaner life in the countryside. But God's ability to save people from challenging situations, like He saved Lot, is a lesson for us. We should trust that God can save us from bad situations and guide us away from wrongdoing. When the Bible says, "The Lord knows how," it's reassuring us that God understands everything, even when we are confused or unsure. This helps us stay grounded in our beliefs and daily actions. It's normal to have questions, like how God's plans work alongside our free will, but we shouldn't let these questions confuse us too much. The moment of truth arrived when something extraordinary and divine happened. Lot appeared to be a good and holy man, but in reality, he was pretending. People did not take his words seriously. Initially, Lot chose to live near the city of Sodom, but over time, Sodom's negative influence began to dominate his life. Lot claimed to have faith in God, but he also enjoyed the lifestyle in Sodom. This situation couldn't go on forever. If God hadn't intervened, Sodom's corrupt ways would have led to Lot's ruin. This story teaches us about 4 important themes: how quickly God can pass judgment, Lot's strong connection to a bad place, God's kindness in saving Lot from a terrible fate, and how Sodom's influence persisted even after its destruction. The people of Israel could learn from these events. When God punishes a group of people harshly, it's because they've done really bad things. They could also see the mistake of getting too attached to the evil ways of Canaan. Knowing what happened to the Canaanites, people should consider how they ought to live. The message is clear. Don't get caught up in worldly things or desires, because everything worldly will eventually fade away. 1 John 2:15-17. God's judgment is something to be wary of. It's a bad idea to become too interested or involved in the world's corrupt systems since they're set for destruction. Jesus told his followers about a future time when everything will be destroyed. He reminded them of what happened to Lot's wife and the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. Luke 17:32-33. He said, "Remember Lot's wife. If you try too hard to keep your life the way it is, you'll lose it. But if you're willing to give up your life, you'll find it." This means If someone only cares about this world's pleasures, they'll end up losing everything because this world is temporary. Luke 17:34-37. Jesus described a scenario where suddenly, one person will be taken away and the other left behind. When his followers asked where this would happen, Jesus said it's like where there are dead bodies, there the vultures will gather. Jesus also said that if he had done his amazing works in the city of Sodom, the people there would have changed their ways. Matthew 11:23. This shows that God's judgment considers what people know, and that sinners will face worse than just physical ruin. The Bible talks a lot about being hospitable. Being hospitable means making others feel welcome and taken care of. It's about being kind and generous to both friends and strangers. In the Bible, God encourages us to practice hospitality. It's a way to show love to others, even those we don't know well. For example, in the Old Testament, God tells us to be welcoming to strangers living among us. Leviticus 19:33-34. Do not mistreat foreigners living in your country. Treat them like they're one of your own, and love them like you love yourself. Remember, you were once foreigners too. I am your God. When Jesus was spreading his message, he and his disciples relied on the generosity of people they met. Matthew 10:9-10. They were told not to bring money or extra items because those who do God's work deserve support from others. Similarly, the early followers of Jesus shared everything they had. They helped each other out and welcomed each other warmly. Acts 2:44-45. And when Paul and his companions were traveling, they were warmly received by Publius, a local leader, who showed them great kindness. Acts 28-7. Long ago, people who traveled depended a lot on the kindness of others. Traveling was hard because there weren't many safe places to stay, and most followers of Christianity didn't have much money. They often needed strangers to let them stay in their homes. They might even use these places for their church meetings. Welcoming strangers was considered a very important act of kindness. For Christian leaders, being welcoming was a sign of true caring and leadership skills. Titus 1:8. Leaders should open their homes to others, love what is good, be wise and fair, live holy lives, and keep themselves under control. 1 Timothy 3:2. Leaders should be good examples, only married once, calm, sensible, well-respected, welcoming, and good at teaching. The book of Hebrews tells us something we should always remember. Hebrews 13:2. Always be ready to welcome strangers, because this way, some people have welcomed angels without realizing it. It's about being friendly and sharing what you have. The Genesis story shows us how Abraham welcomed 3 visitors into his home. Even though he was wealthy and old, he served them himself instead of asking servants to do it, and offered the best he had. Those visitors turned out to be the Lord and 2 angels. This story teaches us to treat everyone with kindness and generosity, just like Abraham did. Was the downfall of Sodom and Gomorrah a mere lesson from the past, or does it hold deeper truths for our lives today? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more.